Hello, Amy. How are you today?
I'm good, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Good. Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. So, welcome to Things That Matter with People Who Care. It's my podcast that I'm excited about because it gives us an opportunity to talk about the things that is on everyone's mind, not just leaders, but people in their everyday lives are confronted with so many things these days. And we're excited to be talking to you. We know you're a master communicator. We all have lots of questions. So I would say buckle up because I'm loaded for bear.
I love it. I love it. Let's bring it.
So I'd like to start, I'm a Vistage chair here in New York City. I'm just about ready to celebrate my third year as a chair. I have two groups. I have a CEO group, and then I have the key executive group of those people who are reporting to CEOs. And it's been a very interesting period of time, sort of evolving out of COVID, but all sorts of other things coming up. So it isn't that the times are any easier, frankly, if the truth be told. We're just allowed to go outside more. That's the only difference. So, but first of all, it's very often a question that I'm asked, and of course I'm prejudiced because I'm a Vistage chair, but I'd love to hear from you why Vistage resonates with you. What have you seen, and what keeps you connected to Vistage?
Well, I joke, Jim, that there are days I bleed teal. That's how much of a fan I am. And teal's their like logo color for those of you who are not familiar. I have personal experience. I was a Vistage member for 8 years. I loved my group. I loved my chairs. And when I say chairs, yes, plural, because I had a group in Atlanta. And when I moved to San Diego, one of the very first things I did within 2 weeks of moving to San Diego was I found a new Vistage group. That's how much I believed in it. And I've been a speaker for Vistage for 22 years. And I'll say this with full sincerity, as a member, the speakers are lovely, like they come and go, they're wonderful. But the value of this experience for me as a member was the executive session, where we would harness the collective intelligence in the room. We would problem solve these opportunities and challenges that my colleagues were facing. And just that Socratic moment of, we're going to get all this wonderful brain power to help you move forward faster, judiciously, conscientiously. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And so I'm just a huge fan.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I always say that I wish I'd known about Vistage prior to my becoming a chair. I had no idea they recruited me to become a chair. And I tell people that, and sometimes they think I'm not being honest with them, but I honestly believe I would have made far fewer mistakes as a COO and a CEO if I had had a peer group saying to me, hey, cool it, you're not on the right track, or you're getting a little ahead of yourself, or stop the nonsense.
Well, I think you're spot on. I think one of the things that we've heard all the time is, it's lonely at the top. It doesn't have to be, but you do have to find that sacred container, where that sacred portal where you feel that it is safe to come and be vulnerable, to share the things that are keeping you up at night, or to share your concerns. And I'm with you. I think that I'm just a big advocate of putting yourself in that mastermind to say, why would you not ask for help? I mean, it's not about not knowing. We all come with levels of intelligence. We all come with levels of experience. It's about expanding that sense of understanding and perspective. I mean, we're not the ones to invent that. It was Socrates years ago that was like, what am I missing? Which was that fundamental question of, yes, Jim, tell me what I'm missing. Yes, Doug. Yes, Samantha. Yes, Raj. Tell me what I'm missing so that I can go forward better.
That's right. No, it's really true. And, one of the things that I love about at least our groups is that people are really very vulnerable, but they're exceedingly impatient. They don't let their vulnerability get in the way of their wanting to accelerate faster than everybody else. And it isn't just being competitive. It's really about, I know I can do more. I know I can be better. And that sort of leads me into my first question. I have found that so many people that I talk to just before they even become candidates, just in conversations that I'm having, everyone speaks to growth, development, perfecting what they do. So few people are willing to invest the time and energy. And I think it's one of the reasons that recruiting the right people is so important. But I'd love to ask you, you speak to so many people around the country, around the world, frankly. what are you seeing in terms of people's willingness to put in the grit that it takes to accelerate?
Oh, there's so much. Can we talk for a week? So I think
Well, I'd like to. Yes, let's do that.
I think I'm going to unpack that a little bit. So one of the things that I've had the privilege, as you have, as a Vistage chair, is we get the honor and privilege of working pretty intimately with leaders around the globe. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm just a big proponent of, is do the work on yourself first. Leadership is hard enough. And I really think that we make leadership easier. It's never easy, but we make it easier when we learn to lead ourselves well first. And so it's kind of like as a speaker, I'll often say to leaders, lead from your scar, not your wound. And really what I mean by that is do the work. I mean, I've seen speakers get on stage and it's like, oh, this is your therapy session, right? Or you've seen leaders who will rant and rage, and I'm like, oh, they're in a cage of rage, right? So I really do believe that as leaders, whether you join a Vistage group or you go see a coach, you join a mastermind group, I think it's really important that we do the work internally so that when we lead ourselves well, we lead others well. And I know there's a lot of people out there like, oh, you can lead others without, having done the work on yourself. I'm like, you can, you just don't do it as well.
Right, right. The other thing that I was anxious to talk to you about because of your breadth of experience, in our two groups, several things continue to be reviewed and resonate with them. And it's been a combination of recruitment, really finding the right people, delegation, how do I get everybody to come back to work, or do I want them to? I'm feeling less confident about my role as the leader, many are feeling, because the world around me is changing daily, and I really don't know what to do first. And is there one or two things that you're hearing most about the entire, what's on leaders' minds? What are you hearing?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things that I think that are really relevant and that are resonating right now. And one is I've had just my own kind of personal scenarios. A lot of times I'm getting called in the last couple of weeks where somebody said, I hired so-and-so. They looked phenomenal on paper. They went through the interview process and they've turned out to be, and I say this professionally, a jerk. Like they're not fitting our culture, or sometimes their words are a little bit more in the expletive language. But I think that what happens is just because it looks good on paper, just because everybody's got the perfect soundbite in an interview, doesn't mean that they're going to be a culture fit. Doesn't mean that they're going to actually line up and embody your values. And so I don't want to do the trite, we need to do a better job of interviewing, which by the way, we do, but it's more about the thoughtful, magical conversation that you're having along the way. And so just as a very quick example, I do a lot with sales teams. I work a lot with sales leaders. And this woman said the other day, she's like, everything that we're measuring him on, is like he's performing, but he's awful to work with, and then I said, well, because then we're measuring the wrong stuff. Just because he's a great salesperson doesn't mean he's a great team player. And so kind of, again, it sounds trite, but maybe he is an A player in sales, but if he's a lousy team player, then what's the cost of that? What's the toxicity of that? And so I said, in the interview process now, you're going to need to ask anecdotally, what did you do to build your sales team? What did you do to actually make sure that you were unified and cohesive as a team and that you were generous in sharing sales practices? What did you do to contribute to a unified, cohesive sales team? And have those types of questions now in your interview process. And again, that's the beauty of being in a group. So for instance, I think one of the best Vistage exercises you can do is to get everybody around the room and say, what was that one question that distilled that this was going to be a good person on your team? What's one of your favorite interview questions that's not trite? I can't Google it. I can't go get the 101 best interview questions. What have you gotten? Those are the exercises that I love.
Right. That's great. And, we've just yesterday at a group meeting, we were having this conversation. And one of the things that I suggested is that they identify 2 or 3 people to interview their candidate, but more importantly, give each one of them a different topic to dig for,
Yes.
because then they can focus on a specific topic and not everybody do a little bit of every topic. So you can really have a meaningful conversation. And the other thing, by having people at different levels, one of the things I found, there was a time that I unfortunately had to let one of my best people go. She was the most incredible strategist. Procter & Gamble loved her. I put her on that business. The problem is nobody would work for her because she always managed up. And she was brilliant, but she destroyed the people that worked for her. So you can kind of ferret that out by getting people under you to be involved in the interviewing process, because that kind of personality won't be particularly intimidated by a lower level person and will act as foolish as they want to. Whereas with you, they want to put on their best face.
Yeah, and I think that we'll just kind of look at that for a second. So having learned that lesson, by the way, and leadership is a practice, and we're learning we're constantly evolving and what we learn. So now wisdom, let's apply it. So then to anybody who's listening right now, that's a great lesson to learn from. So if you're hiring somebody into a leadership position, you want to ask them, who invested in you? Who mentored you? How did you actually take that feedback and apply it to yourself? How would you pay that forward? How would you mentor the next level or generation of leaders? That classic, when did you ever get feedback that wasn't fun to hear, but now in hindsight has served you really well in your own evolution of leadership? How would you manage that up? And now how would you manage that down? Now I'm going 90 miles an hour, but that could be a really thoughtful to tie all these little threads together to go back and say, okay, we're thinking about hiring Jane Doe, or we're thinking about hiring, Doug Smith. I want you, Amy Kay, to just talk to them about what it means to manage up and manage down. That's all you're going to talk about in your interview process. And then we go to the next person and they'll have their own topic. But I love that idea of saying, I'm responsible as a leader for the bigger, better, bolder questions. And if I'm responsible for the bigger, better, bolder questions, that starts with the interview process. So Jim, I'm going to say something, I'll close with my answer on this one with just a little bit of a provocative statement, but okay. I really want your listeners and your Vistage members to hear it.
Okay, I'm listening.
You have the team you deserve. So if your team is a rock star team, more power to you. And if you're like, oh my God, I got one or two players that are like lazy louses, it's the ones you deserve. So right. You as the leader have to take action to get the team that you deserve.
Yeah. And here's another question that I wanted to ask you from a selfish point of view, because as I look to expand the group, and now that I'm somewhat seasoned as 3 years, I see chairs that have been chairs for 15 years, but nonetheless, I always think it's very cheeky. I think it's a bit cavalier to answer a candidate's question. So look, I think what you're doing is amazing, and I would love to be part of the organization. I simply don't have time. And the typical answer is, well, understand, we're not taking you away from your business. We're taking you out of the weeds of your business. Yeah. Well, that's fine and well, but that's a little too, okay, fine. But doesn't matter that every day I wake up with 17 things that I need to do and I can only get to 7. So how can I give you a day a month? Through the course of your talking to people and being involved in Vistage, is there an additional insight that you have in terms of, okay, guys, that may be true, but you're worth it as a leader, or how do you see answering that question without being cavalier?
I think it's a choice of what matters most, and it's a priority about what you value. I mean, I've heard so many people say that too. I don't have time for this. And to me, it's sort of like, so you don't have time for self-growth. You don't have time for evolution and learning. You don't have time for wisdom. All of the things that would actually give you more time to grow and scale your business, spend more time in the relationships that matter most, go for a walk with your dog. I mean, let's just do the example of, you make a bad hire. Do you know how time consuming that is on so many levels? That is like one of the biggest soul sucking energies of all, is to have really just not talented people around you, or people who don't give a flying fig. And so to me, it's like, if you were less clue free, if you were actually more wise, more discerning, more thoughtful in your decisions, if you were smarter in your strategy, finances, culture, operations, you would have more growth, with less stress and ease. So when you tell me you don't have time, it actually means, and I say this is an internal conversation, y'all. It's not an external, but this is my thought. Oh, you don't get it. You don't get it. So I now have to back up and go, well, then what am I going to say? What stories am I going to tell that might help this person get it to help themselves? I mean, it's kind of the, I really believe in my personal, now we're off on a tangent, but I really believe in my own personal development, and it's a priority. I do get up, Jim, and this is not me sounding self-righteous. This is me like, this is just the choices that I make. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, not because of an ego thing, but because I so crave and prioritize my time. Nobody interrupts me between 5 and 6:30 unless I happen to have an early morning East Coast, because I'm in San Diego, podcast that I have to be on. But my morning routine is a sacred ritual. I am prioritizing that. If you are a leader, prioritizing your self-development, your personal growth, your own leadership, communication, financial skills, that's going to serve you so well. Right. So when you say that you don't have time, my first thought is, well, wouldn't you love if you had more time? Right. Well, this is one of the best ways to invest your time, ironically, to get more of it.
Exactly. No, that's it. That's exactly true. Another topic that I find interesting is when I hear chairs talk about who are the speakers they bring in, what are the topics that they address, what kinds of issues are they seeing? Something that I find interesting is that while any one of us can list the 5 most topical discussions these days, what you read in the New York Times, the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, doesn't matter. The reality of it is, I think it's equally as important to always bring it down to, what do I think I'm going to have to do tomorrow? Like, what's on my mind to get done this week? Instead of worrying about ChatGPT and is it accurate? Can I use it? Should I use it? Well, let's, instead of talking about all those things, let's talk about, do you use it? Are you playing with it yet? Yeah. Are you trying to get comfortable? So what are the practical things in the same sort of thing in your recruitment? Instead of saying, oh my God, I'm so worried about bringing in the right people. How do I do this? Well, instead, think about all the things that you're not doing surrounding recruitment, and what will you do about it tomorrow morning? So I've sort of started with this whole issue of, let's walk up the staircase or the ladder one step at a time and quit trying to double jump it, because I don't like falling.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear your point of view on, I know it has to be a balance of big issues that confront us and the things that we wake up to each day. But I do think that sometimes we can solve big issues by making sure that the little ones are all solved in advance.
Yeah. And I think you really nailed it. That was a great analogy. It is one step at a time. And occasionally you do get to, jump a step, but when you try to leap too far, you will fall. And I think that's just a beautiful visual for saying leadership's a practice. I mean, that's nothing new, right? We all know it's a practice, but that means you actually have to show up to practice.
Right.
So you have to take the small steps. You have to take the commitment. I mean, I always joke, so many of my girlfriends and my guy friends are like, I put on the gym outfit, I bought the new shorts, or I bought the new leggings or joggers. Why haven't I lost weight yet? I'm like, because you look cute, but you actually haven't done the work yet, right? You haven't gone to the gym. So it is a practice of showing up and saying, what small steps can I take? And then making sure that they're in alignment, making sure that they are responding to what's relevant. There's a lot of noise in the world. That's part of the reason that I love my Vistage group is you would get all these mixed messages, right? I mean, we both come from like marketing and sales backgrounds. I used to stand in the grocery store, and this will date me, but there would be like that classic Inquirer magazine that would be like, lose 15 pounds. And then right underneath it would be the best chocolate cake recipe of your life. I'm like, I can't even, get a sane aligned message off of a magazine cover. So part of Vistage is taking the deep breath, sitting back, discerning what of all the noise is actually relevant to your company, relevant to your people, relevant to your prospects and your clients, and then saying, well, if that's what's relevant, then where do we start taking action? Where do we start to make momentum? Where do we get the mini win or the mini yes that moves us forward as a whole? And that sounds very philosophical and existential until you actually have the conversation of what's relevant, what matters to us, what do we want to take on for an action step. And then as a leader, it's not, Jim, this is probably going to cause a little bit of conversation too, but I don't believe in balance. And I know that's a whole nother podcast, but I think balance is a crock. I think that the more you try to chase balance, the more stress you actually feel. I really think you should be like, what's my priority now? And it could be month, week, quarter, it could be season of your life, but what's my priority now? And then when you say, well, if these are our priorities, then these are the practices that I'm going to be in. This is what I'm going to show up and put my attention and energy to. And then I think that kind of goes right back to our time response. One of the things, and now maybe this is a more thoughtful response to what you said earlier, I don't believe in time, and I think time is going to be your kiss of death as a leader. And I think that most leaders miss the opportunity to say, it isn't time, it's energy. That's the fundamental currency of high performers. So if you focus your energy, channel your energy, prioritize what you give your energy to, stop the energy drains and soul-sucking leaks, then you actually get a hell of a lot done in the day, the week, the month, the season that you're in.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And I think, and I don't think there's any, well, there's probably some, but most leaders, even if they're really good at delegating, they don't delegate enough. There are things that occupy our time that we should be delegating to other people. At the same time, there are resources that are available to us to reduce the time element for the projects that we approach. If we'll take a little bit of time and do some due diligence as opposed to diving into the project, you'll feel a little more confident that you have options. The very reason for Vistage is to give leaders options. And so why not have every one of your tasks have options involved in it too? And there's that sort of exhale that leaders learn, okay, before I jump into this and get excited about the deadline, instead of saying, oh my God, I only have a week to get this done, look at, I could take a day right now and bring the group together and give everybody a topic to get as much due diligence from it as possible so that we cull the best ideas or whatever the case may be. And then you have much better foundation from which to start, and your deadline doesn't seem so impossible.
Yeah.
If we all learn how to manage our time better and also be confident in the expression, I don't think there's a leader out there that wouldn't agree and put their hand up and say, oh gosh, Jim, I completely agree with you. Permission to fail is probably one of the most important things a leader can understand. And yet I don't think most people are willing to deal with the consequences of that because they think of the short-term loss, not the long-term gain.
Yeah. And well, every leader will say, I have an open door policy until they close the door. I give you permission to fail until you actually do, and then I'll fire your ass, right? So I think that if we go back a little bit, one of the things that's really important too is to stop and have some of the most important conversations that will actually get you time on the back end. So it is that classic, I don't have time to tell that person, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no. Take a deep breath. Have that conversation that causes you to purposefully slow down so that you actually buy back time on the back end. So here's a great example. Most of us delegate. We think we're clear. We're not. Something goes awry or somebody goes down a bunny hole, and then we immediately say to ourselves, see, I shouldn't have delegated. And it's like, no. What you should have done was have a more informative and robust dialogue when you were delegating to say, here's what this delegation looks like. Here's your authority, which we often don't talk about in delegation. So what does that sound like? It sounds like, Jim, I want you to research, let's just say, event venues. You have the authority to come back and propose 5, or you have the authority to choose one that has a budget and whatever, it meets these criteria, and go for it. But what we don't do is stop long enough to think it through, to say, hey, let me have a little longer conversation up front to save me a bunch of time on the back end.
Right. No, it's interesting because everybody would agree that if you run a relay race, that nobody's going to hand you the baton, because the person with the baton is afraid you're going to drop it if you don't grab it. You have to grab that baton and run with it. Nobody says, here it is, you can take it now. And that so applies to business. And so, and this really goes to everybody that a leader hires. One of the things that I think people should look for is somebody that is confident and alert to the fact that you're not hiring them for the job that exists. You're expecting them to create this new role. These are merely the parameters for it.
Right.
And leaders sometimes, if they're so controlling, no, these are things I want you to do. So if you do these 4 things in the job, then you're doing a great job. And people think, okay, fine, all I have to do at those 4 things, they're done at 3 o'clock. I can go home at 5, everything is fine. They will never accelerate in the world of business, because really it's about starting from the top all the way down, or actually I should really say starting from the bottom all the way to the top. People have to create their roles in a way that's prescient. They need to think about, for example, I would never take a job that I thought was right for me today. I would take a job that made me nervous because frankly, I think I can do this, but I'm not absolutely positive. This is a stretch for me. And that means a year from now or 2 years from now, I'm going to be better than what I am today, as opposed to say, I got this, I can do this, I can do this in my sleep. I don't want that. And I'll take that to the leadership level. If a CEO feels, oh, look, I've got all the counsel I need, and I have a great board, I have a great support group. I really, thanks, Jim. It sounds terrific, but I'm in good shape. And, you know, my answer is, well, gosh, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And I don't often get to meet people where everything is working perfectly every day. And so I wish you well. That it's amazing, and thanks for your time. And if they come back with, well, it's not perfect every day, then there's hope in terms of whether they join the group or not, that they're saying, well, it really isn't. But the minute I hear it's perfect every day, and I got this, I've been the managing partner of this law firm for 21 years, and you know, we're the second largest firm in X city. That's somebody I put back up on my list for 6 months and say, everything's still perfect.
Well, and here's the truth. There are people who want to grow. There are people who are excited at constantly, you know, pushing themselves forward and evolving. There are others who kind of reach the status quo level of complacency, and they're comfortable being there. It's just a personality thing. You want people that are intellectually curious. You want people to grow. You want people who want other people growing around them. I mean, it's kind of like I go back to an elementary school story. So before I went into sales, before I started my own company, I was an elementary school teacher. And I used to tell my 5th graders, I have a rubric, and I would hold up this rubric and I would say, you do all 12 things on this rubric, what's your grade? And they would all be like, and I was like, excellent guess, but no. And they were like, it's like, you do everything. You just satisfied my requirements. So what's your grade? And they're like, oh, a C? I was like, exactly. Because an A means you want to go above and beyond. You want to stretch yourself. You want to push yourself. You want to see what you're capable of creating. That's amazing. But this is the bare minimum. And what's so fascinating, leapfrog forward 35, 40 years, we're now hiring adults. Almost every job description out there says, this is what I'm looking for, a minimum of, a minimum of, a minimum of. And so we're bringing in that sense of complacency. It goes right back to what you were saying. If I can do it now, why would I want to do it? And so I love it when corporations, when leadership teams say, here's what we're looking for, and here's where we're hoping to expand you into. Here's where we're hoping you're going to stretch us. Here's where we're hoping you're going to take your learning agility and your past wins, and you're going to stretch and challenge yourself to create something incredible and amazing with us. Those are the conversations that change the interview process.
Yeah. You know, you have to think about this for 1 second, but I do think it's a marvelous piece of insight. Is my mother used to say to the 3 of us boys, she had 3 boys growing up, and we were all hellions. And we all, you know, really wanted to do everything everywhere all the time. And she always used to give us the advice that be careful what you select. If you're the most attractive person at the party, you're at the wrong party.
Ooh.
And it really applies to everything in life. If a CEO feels that she is leading the category and she's the most sought after speaker in the industry, and then she's not surrounding herself with people that are challenging her, that are giving her the opportunity to be even better than she is. And it's that sort of always surround yourself and seek out challenges and people and circumstances and books and parties that make you want to learn more about it, not that you walk in and you're the belle of the ball.
Yeah, and I think that's coming to you with that exact analogy, because I'm a speaker. I don't very often get to hear speakers, so I'll try to find them online to see what they're doing. And one of the things that I love is you never want to emulate anybody. Like, it's their message, it's their story, it's their experience. They have their own personality. But watching somebody who's exemplary, watching somebody who's completely different from you, whether that's background, experience, culture, language, you learn so much from the world, and you learn from all of that diversity. And so it's interesting, because I grew up with a father who said, embrace diversity. He said, I've had people who I grew up with who are like, wouldn't it be all great if we thought the same thing? And he's like, no, it would not be great if we all thought the same thing. And so I love listening to speakers who raise my game, who are provocative in their thought, who are sharing something that wouldn't have occurred to me to even write a speech about. And that's what I love about the world. And I'm going to pull it back, because I can genuinely say this as a Vistage member. When you surround yourself with other really bright people who are also vulnerable, who believe that, yes, they are amazing and strong, and they also believe that they got a long way to go on this journey, you hit that sweet spot of everybody's got a lot of wisdom to share, and everybody's really open to expanding their capacity to play even better. And that's a beautiful place to be.
It's one of the things that in the corporate world, it's just true. It's difficult to find as much diversity as every group really needs. It's the nature of what the world has been. Now we're seeing a lot of change, and we're seeing it quickly, and that's great. And I can say that my key group in particular is extremely diverse, and I leave every meeting so stimulated, and I learn so much from these members. I mean, I'm the chair, and I feel a little guilty sometimes, because I'm thinking, gosh, this has been just a great eye-opening experience for me, and I see them responding to it. But in my case, I feel like I'm sucking out information and insight, and to watch diversity in action is one of the most. If you are a student, it's one of the most exhilarating things that you can witness, because you've never thought of these ideas, or you never gave that consideration, or this opened up a whole new avenue, or, oh my goodness, why would I not have thought of this? It expands your world. And to me, that's exhilarating.
Well, I think that's where we should end, because I know we're almost out of time, but let me just mirror something back to you. And that is, what a beautiful gift to model what you are teaching and preaching as a Vistage chair. And that is, do what you love, be lit up about it. It makes you a better leader when you're loving what you're doing. So the fact that you are getting so much joy and radiance and brilliance being a Vistage chair, you're just practicing what you preach.
Well, you're very kind, and I just feel very grateful to be part of it. And I tell the two groups every day, I'm so grateful to get up and have this to come to, because it's so much fun. And speaking to you is so much fun. Amy, thank you. I cannot thank you enough. I appreciate your time. We'll talk soon. And I really appreciate your joining us on Things That Matter with People Who Care.
Oh, thank you so much. From my heart to yours, Jim. Hugs.
Cheers.